Did you know there may once have been an ancient superpower where humans could manipulate gravity, travel through the air, heal using crystal energy, and connect with other dimensions? But that entire civilization was wiped out overnight. Imagine a world where humans lived in harmony with nature, used sound and light to heal the body, and possessed technology far beyond anything we've ever known. That world is not science fiction, it is Atlantis. A civilization believed to have reached the pinnacle of wisdom, spirituality, and science before sinking beneath the ocean. From Plato's mysterious accounts, to the lost records of the Library of Alexandria, to the strange prophecies of psychic Edgar Cayce, Atlantis seems to be more than just myth. Evidence suggests it was once the center of ancient knowledge where technology harnessed solar energy crystals and even the power of the stars. An empire with hundreds of thousands of people, godlike rulers, and a society where the human soul was awakened and connected to the universe. But then, what happened? Why did such a magnificent civilization disappear without a trace? Did they misuse their powers and destroy themselves in a global catastrophe? Or did they leave behind hidden signs for humanity, waiting to be decoded? Join me on a journey through the labyrinth of hidden history, tracing the clues of Atlantis from underwater mountain ranges in the Atlantic, mystical Egyptian texts, to theories of aliens and space portals. Each clue is a piece of the puzzle guiding us toward a truth that few have dared to speak. Part 1. The first clues. When Plato recorded the voice of the gods, let us travel back in time to the 4th century BCE. In the quiet dimness of his study, one of the greatest minds of the ancient world sat in silence writing. He wasn't writing about theory or politics, but about a vanished world. It was the first time modern humanity heard the name Atlantis. Plato, in his 2 dialogues, Timaeus and Critias, recounted a story passed down to him of a large island beyond the Pillars of Hercules, now known as the Strait of Gibraltar. Atlantis, he said, was a brilliant civilization with concentric circular cities, canals leading straight to the sea, and treasures of orichalcum, a legendary metal that glowed like fire. But Atlantis was more than a location. It symbolized an era, a time when people lived in harmony with nature, the divine, and themselves. Though told as philosophy, the story has sparked centuries of questions. Was Plato echoing a true memory? Plato did not invent Atlantis. He claimed he was merely recording the words of Solon, a lawmaker of Athens, who traveled to Egypt around 600 years earlier. There, Egyptian priests told Solon about a mighty ancient civilization that had once existed off the Atlantic coast. Plato not only listened, but sought out followers of the Pythagorean school, known for preserving esoteric knowledge from Lemuria, an even older civilization than Atlantis. They taught not just mathematics, but sacred symbols, frequencies, and energetic structures Plato understood as clues to a forgotten past. In his writings, Atlantis was not just an island, it was the sacred heart of a golden age. Yet for some reason, only a few generations after Plato, almost no one spoke of Atlantis anymore. Did his account touch on something humanity wasn't ready to remember? Or was there an effort to bury the story forever? We often think of myths as products of imagination, but sometimes myths are encoded memories buried deep within the human subconscious. Atlantis may be one of them, and like an underground current, that memory never vanished. It waits for the right moment to resurface. So if Plato was just the messenger, what is the true nature of Atlantis? Was it real? And if so, why did it collapse in a single night and day as he claimed? In our next journey, we will dive deeper, where not only philosophy, but mysticism, archaeology, and science begin to speak. Clues scattered across oceans in ancient maps, in magnetic anomalies, and in the memories of spiritual travelers all point to a long-sealed gateway. But as we approach, we realize the gate isn't locked. It's simply waiting for someone with the right frequency to open it. Part 2. Sacred Energy. When crystals spoke. As the dust of history lifts, we see not just a stone-built Atlantis, but one of light frequency and energy. A According to mystical traditions passed down through generations, Atlantis didn't run on fire, steam, or electricity like our current world. Instead, they used crystals not as ornaments, but as conduits of cosmic energy. One of the most powerful crystals mentioned is the Tuawe stone, a giant hexagonal crystal capable of amplifying sunlight, absorbing vibrations from space, and transmitting energy anywhere. They needed no wires, no factories, only crystal energy towers connected by thought and resonance. These crystals were not just matter, they were living entities interacting with the consciousness of those who controlled them. Atlantis once soared through the sky, dove deep underwater, and communicated across hundreds of miles, all thanks to a crystal system functioning like a biological network. But like fire, which warms and burns the crystals of Atlantis, had two faces: healing and destruction. At first, Atlanteans used crystals to balance energy, heal wounds, and harmonize the biofield. They understood that every living being has a core frequency, and if we adjust the vibration correctly, illness could be healed without surgery. However, as powerful groups in Atlantean society began to override sacred principles, they started experimenting with biomanipulation. Cloning, soul splicing, and reversing reincarnation cycles emerged. The children of the Law of One, those loyal to universal law, tried to stop this, but the opposing group, the Sons of Belial, pursued absolute power, viewing all beings as resources. A society that once healed the world became divided by its own knowledge. And when the crystals were misused, they lost neutrality, becoming tools that vibrated off the axis of the universe. The downfall did not come from an enemy, but from internal imbalance. When Atlantis' crystal network was overloaded by ambitious energy, the planet's magnetic field began to destabilize. Many mystics believe that phenomena like the Bermuda Triangle are areas where ancient energy portals still operate unintentionally, causing time distortions, disorientation, and a sensation of being pulled into nothingness. While science has yet to prove this one truth stands, no civilization can survive after losing the balance between power and ethics. Collapse happens not only in physical structures, but in the very structure of the soul. And when the Atlanteans lost their original purpose to unite spirit and matter, they ceased being keepers of the flame and became those who played with forces beyond their control. That was when the fractures began, and downfall became a matter of time. Part 3. The Memory Bearers. When the Atlantean race emerged. If Atlantis was a living being, then the Atlanteans were its cells, holding the oldest memories of humanity. According to mystical records, they were not merely human, but hybrids of starborn souls and earthly bodies. Their origins are tied to extraterrestrial species, such as the Pleiadians, the Azirs, or even entities from the fifth dimension. These beings didn't colonize Earth, but seeded it, creating a race capable of sensing energy, communicating telepathically, and harmonizing with nature. Early Atlanteans possessed a strong third eye, a highly active pineal gland, allowing them to perceive energy fields, see beyond matter, and connect to the invisible realm. They were tall, robust, with light blue skin, a symbol of star blood. Children were not raised on knowledge, but on memory transmitted through meditation, sound, and symbolic language. A unique aspect of Atlantean society was the division by soul frequency. There were no monarchs. The leader of each region was the person with the highest vibration, one most deeply attuned to nature and community. Power came not from wealth or weapons, but from resonance with the universe. From this principle arose 12 great clans, each carrying a stellar code, representing a constellation with its own knowledge symbols and mission. Some clans specialized in sound healing, others in manipulating light or guiding the reincarnation cycle. There were no wars, only harmony, like instruments in a divine symphony. But not all maintained high vibration. Some individuals, due to trauma, ambition, or inner discord, began to fall out of sync. And as more people drifted from their original frequency, the collective resonance began to distort. Matthias de Stefano, a rememberer, recounted that he once lived a life in Atlantis. According to him, The empire's capital was named Hafiz, a concentric circular city structured like ripple waves spreading across the ocean. Hafiz was not just a political center, but a vibrational hub where the master crystal connected with 12 energy pillars across the continent. On special occasions, all inhabitants would gather to chant in unison, not for entertainment, but to tune the city's vibration. That sound, if measured, could make water dance earth tremble and crystals glow. But then, something changed. A group of people from the southern edge began to withdraw from the rituals. They studied anatomy mechanics and biological control systems. They viewed vibrational laws as superstition and believed that with proper technology, artificial vibrations could surpass nature. Thus, two Atlantean worlds arose in parallel. A sacred Atlantis turned inward, connecting with the divine, and a material Atlantis turned outward, seeking to conquer matter and nature. One group continued to meditate under waterfalls, heal with sound, and live among breathing stone forests. The other drilled into the earth for ores, built experimental devices, and cloned life in test tubes. At first, both worlds coexisted, but over time, the sacred areas became suppressed like a body with blocked energy. Temples were moved from energy centers. Sacred springs were diverted to serve factories. Harmonic rituals were replaced with scientific conferences. Gradually, the soul of Atlantis ceased to resonate, it fractured. The spiritual masters retreated into the forests and mountains, forming the final sacred ring, hoping to preserve the last fragments of Atlantean memory. In mystical records, this era marks Atlantis entering the Neo-Atlantean cycle, a half-soul, half-machine phase. People forgot their dreams, their connection to nature. Children were no longer taught to feel the wind in silence, but trained to control machines with their thoughts. Schools stopped teaching the sound of stones, the light of plants, and focused on particle energy and synthetic biology. Some still felt uneasy, dreaming of floods and exploding crystals, but they were labeled unstable or outdated. Warnings were dismissed by technology. Atlantis had become too powerful, and like all at their peak, pride blinded them to collapse. The tragedy wasn't from external destruction, but from the Atlanteans forgetting who they once were. When the Flamekeepers sensed the end was near, they began preparing for the final exodus. Not everyone could leave, only those who still held their core frequency or had the vibration needed to carry memory into a new era. They brought small crystals, sacred symbols, energy maps, and even genetic codes of holy plants. Their destinations were highlands, the Andes, Egypt, Yucatan, ancient Greece, and the Himalayas. They didn't rebuild Atlantis. They seeded memory stations across the planet. That's why pyramids, ancient stone temples, and sacred symbols share geometry, astronomy, and sound frequencies. It's not coincidence, it's continuity. Atlantis never truly vanished. It retreated into the bloodstream of humanity, waiting to be awakened. And if you've ever felt you know Atlantis without studying it, perhaps a part of you once lived there. Not only does Atlantis live on in history, it remains vivid in dreams and in the deepest memories of humanity. Today, many people through past life regression or deep meditative states have recalled fragments of life in Atlantis. They describe councils of light, radiant energy portals, sacred dawn ceremonies, where communities gathered to recalibrate the heart's frequency. People who've never met share identical memories. This cannot be mere coincidence. Atlantis may no longer exist physically, but it has never disappeared from the collective vibrational field of humankind. When many begin to remember to resonate, to rebuild from the fragments, a new form of Atlantis may emerge. We don't need to find a sunken city beneath the sea. Atlantis manifests in how we heal through sound, honor nature, and live as part of the cosmos, not as its master. Because Atlantis ultimately is a reminder of who we once were. Part 4. Fragments on Earth. The living legacy of Atlantis. If Atlantis truly vanished, why do its remnants still appear scattered across the world? When survivors fled the collapsing continent, they brought not only crystals, memories, and symbols, but also the very vibrational source code of that civilization. In Egypt, they built pyramids with a 51.5-degree incline, a slope, matching perfect energetic geometry. In Peru's Machu Picchu, stones were fitted so precisely, a sheet of paper couldn't slip between them, with no mortar, no machines. These techniques can't be explained by the knowledge of that era. From Central America to Tibet, from the Indus Valley to the island of Crete, Atlantis echoes through every ancient civilization. Circular, spiral, triangular, and pillar symbols appear as a sacred language beyond time. Perhaps those temples weren't just places of worship, but memory activators. What was forgotten in books still whispers through stone, light, and space. What makes these ancient structures so strikingly similar? Did these civilizations once communicate with one another? Or do they all share a common origin? In the Atlantis model, cities were built in spirals, concentric rings, and aligned with star axes, a pattern also seen in Maya temples, Angkor Wat, and the Giza Plateau. The structures were not just for beauty, they harmonized with cosmic energy. As starlight passed through the buildings, absorbed, amplified, and resonated energy to their inhabitants. This was vibrational technology needing no electricity, yet more powerful than any generator. Modern humans are only beginning to understand. Studies in acoustics, optics, and quantum physics are retracing principles from tens of thousands of years ago. The question is no longer who built these structures, but what did they know that we've forgotten? And if the answer lies in Atlantean memory, perhaps it's time to reopen the sealed page. One of the most astonishing traces is the symbolic language. Sacred geometries, mandalas, the eye, appear in cultures that never interacted. Even isolated tribes use similar numerological systems like 3 and 6, 9, or 12 directions, 7 levels. These may be echoes of the Atlantean energy system. The symbols aren't just decorations, they're vibration codes engraved into architecture to affect human biofields. Standing within these temples, many feel overwhelmed, tearful, or struck by the feeling of having been here before. That is cellular memory, a type of recall beyond language. And because it can't be explained by logic, modern science ignores it. But those who feel it know part of Atlantis' memory is still alive, transmitting like an underground current ready to surface when enough people call its name. Another often mentioned site in Atlantean lore is the Bermuda Triangle, a host of mysterious phenomena. Vanishing aircraft, reversed compasses, silenced radios have made it a modern legend. Some mystics believe an energy portal still exists beneath Bermuda's ocean, where an Atlantean crystal remains faintly active. When Atlantis fell, the crystal network may not have been entirely destroyed, only knocked out of frequency. They still emit vibrations enough to disrupt modern electronics because their base frequencies differ from machine waves. Bermuda might also be one of several space-time fractures where the boundary between the third and fourth dimensions thins. Pilots have described flying into a tube of light, losing time, or being pulled into another realm. If that's true, then Atlantis never fully disappeared. It merely shifted into another spatial plane, waiting for those whose frequency can step through. The 21st century has seen the return of ideas once dismissed as fantasy healing frequencies: bioenergy, cellular memory, and the heart's magnetic field. What the Atlanteans once understood, not through textbooks but through direct experience with crystal sound and thought, is now being rediscovered by modern science. From Masaru Emoto's water frequency experiments to quantum observer effects, all point to one truth: the world does not stand still, it vibrates. And when we grasp this, we begin to reconnect with the cosmos. The Atlanteans needed no language like ours. They communicated through imagery, emotion, and resonance. Today, as artists, scientists, and meditators attune once more, they follow Atlantean footsteps whether they know it or not. Atlantis is not just an ancient tale. It is a frequency returning through the minds of those awake enough to listen. But it's not only adults who recall Atlantis. Some children are born speaking of crystal cities, spheres of light, sacred rites and portals, things no one has taught them. They are called starseeds or remembering souls. In dreams, they meet luminous teachers, clad in silver robes, standing among glowing pillars, and say, "That's where I used to learn." These children, wherever they are, share the same experiences. Scientists label it imagination, but spiritual explorers know it is past life memory. Perhaps this new generation is the bridge for Atlantis' return, not through architecture, but vibration. When enough people remember and live by the old frequency, the Atlantean grid will reactivate, not from the outside in, but from within each heart. Then the memory of Atlantis won't be a memory anymore, but a living reality. The memory of Atlantis returns not only in spirit or science, but in how we're beginning to redefine progress. We're realizing that growth can't be measured by GDP or tech alone, but by the harmony between humans' nature and collective awareness. The early Atlanteans understood this. An ideal society is not race, but a resonance. Today's emerging communities, from eco-villages to healing centers, are experimenting with a new model where science meets spirit and economy support sustainable evolution. The seeds of Atlantis, once in bloom, now begin to sprout again, quietly but powerfully. We may not see a crystal city rise from the sea, but we are witnessing vibrational cities grow in human hearts. And that is the signal that Atlantis, though it once fell, may return, if this time we learn to protect it. Part 5. The Modern Mirror. When Atlantis is reborn in crisis. If Atlantis was a lesson, then humanity today is entering the test. In a world increasingly dependent on technology, where artificial intelligence mimics humans and humans simulate emotions through machines, we're unknowingly repeating a familiar cycle. It's what once happened in Atlantis, when technology outpaced spirituality, when knowledge detached from intuition, and when power became unmoored from gratitude. The modern world has everything: nuclear energy, gene editing, global networks, but lacks one thing: soul connection. Just like the late Atlanteans, we now use once sacred elements, water, earth, air, as mere tools, no longer recognizing them as living beings. And as a natural reaction, the planet is responding. Climate change, biodiversity, loss, global psychological crises. These aren't just ecological signs, but symptoms of spiritual disconnection. Once again, Atlantis stirs as a warning. In ancient Atlantis, when technologies for gravity control, crystal energy, and interdimensional communication were abused, they didn't stop. They pushed further, creating hybrids, breaking reincarnation cycles, and transferring consciousness into artificial bodies. The sages of that era raised alarms, but were deemed outdated. The same script is unfolding today. Biotech is altering DNA. Some projects aim to upload human brains to the cloud. AIs are beginning to develop reflective awareness. And while these advances can save lives, they might also make humanity forget itself. If we pursue optimization without asking, should we walk the path the Atlanteans once tread and fell. They believed they were invincible until the crystals began to fracture from within. And when they broke, nothing could save them, for what was lost wasn't technology, but the soul. But as in Atlantean times, not all are asleep. There are those awakening, building a new Atlantis not on maps, but in consciousness. They are quantum scientists studying the vibration of emotions, energy healers using frequency and light, artists channeling sacred symbolism, and ordinary people in cities quietly tending their inner flame. They seek not power, but resonance. These communities are reconnecting the global light grid, what Atlanteans called the spiritual resonance network. When enough people vibrate with love, gratitude, and connection, the network will come alive again. No one governs it. No government need acknowledge it, yet it will shift collective consciousness like an undercurrent from a sea shaping a coastline. And from this, a new Atlantis may appear, not of crystal, but of inner light. Today, many young people no longer resonate with the system. They find no meaning in dogma, no security in material consumption, and often feel empty in a crowded world. That feeling, according to spiritual guides, is an echo of Atlantis. Souls who lived in the final days of that civilization are reincarnating to complete their unfinished journey. They carry a wordless sense of loss, a longing for harmony, and an instinctive resistance to separation. That's why they turn toward nature, healing music, meditation, energy. They don't remember details, but their hearts know. And with each step they take, they are calling back something that once was. Perhaps this generation is the bridge, not through violence, not through resistance, but through transformation. By living differently, thinking differently, loving differently, they reawaken the Atlantean frequency without seeking a place. What's remarkable is that many modern technologies actually existed in Atlantis. Unlimited clean energy. They used crystals, non-verbal communication. They synchronized brainwaves, drugless healing. They used sound and light. This shows that evolution isn't linear, it's cyclical. When a cycle repeats, the question isn't, where are we going, but will we repeat the same mistakes? If Atlantis fell by losing the balance between ethics and knowledge, then today's humanity must hold that lesson as its compass. There's nothing wrong with progress, so long as it doesn't outpace consciousness. When power is no longer guided by compassion, it becomes a weapon. And the most terrifying technology isn't one that kills, but one that makes humans forget who they are. That was Atlantis' forgotten truth, and it's what we can fix if we awaken. Some say when humanity reaches the right vibration, Atlantis will not only reappear in consciousness, but perhaps even in physical form. A continent rising from the sea, perhaps. Or perhaps a city of light appearing in the fourth dimension, visible only to those who see with their hearts. Those who've met Atlantis in dreams, meditation, or near-death experiences all describe the same vision: a circular city, crystal towers, trees of light, and radiant people. It doesn't feel like a journey, but like coming home. They say everything there vibrates is alive and loves. Maybe it's not a place in space, but a layer of awareness. And if so, Atlantis doesn't need to return because it never left. It's simply waiting for those who remember to step through the vibrational gate and become part of it again. But if Atlantis is not only past nor just future, then perhaps it is a present choice. Every day we stand at the threshold between two Atlantises, one of domination, of technological abuse, of inner division, and one of resonance, of remembrance, of living in harmony with life. The story of Atlantis is not meant to tell of a sunken city, but to place a mirror before humanity. In that mirror, we see ourselves full of potential creativity, but also vulnerable to our own arrogance. History does not force repetition, it invites learning. If Atlantis fell from forgetting the sacredness in every grain of sand, every gust of wind, then that lesson echoes today in engine noise, screen light, and sleepless nights. Don't wait for a great flood to learn how to listen. Atlantis may be a memory, but also a calling. And the question is, will we refuse, or will we walk through? Part 6, The Soul's Mirror. When Atlantis becomes a choice, when all the puzzle pieces come together, we no longer see Atlantis as a fairy tale. It emerges as a lesson, a trial, and a mirror in which humanity sees itself reflected. In that mirror, we see the Golden Age, when knowledge was used to heal, when humans lived with nature as a shared organism, and when power lay not in control, but in resonance. But within it, we also see pride misalignment and the consequences of forgetting our spiritual roots. Atlantis isn't a place to be found by submarines or radar. It's a state of consciousness where each person can choose to live like an Atlantean, harmoniously, deeply, and toward the light. We don't need another civilization to fall for us to learn this. If Atlantis' memory has returned, then now every choice, every word, every act, every way we live can be a brick in rebuilding a new Atlantis within the human soul. We live in a special time where what was once dismissed as mystical or irrational is now being proven by science. Emotions influence DNA, heart frequencies, impact magnetic fields, and consciousness can change observation outcomes. These were foundations of Atlantean society. They didn't divide spirit and science because they knew both were faces of one truth. They didn't fear the invisible, they conversed with it. Today, as leading researchers revisit intuitive questions, as artists shape creations with brainwaves, and as meditation enters medicine, this isn't innovation, but remembrance. Atlantis won't return with explosions or lights, but through silent transformation in thinking, living, and the heartbeat of each awakened soul. Once enough people step out of the maze of fear, ego, and separation, the Atlantis gate will open, no key needed. And then the final question won't be, was Atlantis real? But will we dare live as if it truly exists? If Atlantis is the highest human state, then we each of us are itself. Every conscious action, every decision rooted in connection, every step taken for life instead of power, is a vibration that helps awaken that memory. Maybe we won't see crystal cities rise from the sea, but if one day people learn to listen to water as a living spirit, treat others with the heart's purity, and use technology as support, not soul replacement, then Atlantis has returned, not anywhere else, but in our eyes, our hands, and our breath. And then past, present, and future will merge into the complete being humanity has always sought to become. This journey has been an interweaving of myth and history, where Atlantis emerges as a symbol of extraordinary advancement but also tragic decline. Through the perspectives of Plato, Helena Blavatsky, Rudolf Steiner, Edgar Cayce, and Matthias de Stefano, we have seen an Atlantis that was not only a fertile land, but a convergence of spiritual, technological, and cosmic brilliance. It was once described as possessing transcendent powers, harnessing energy from crystals, transmitting information through sound and light, moving through space, using technology that left no physical trace. Atlantis once stood as a civilization, balancing inner consciousness with material mastery, until ambition and loss of control tipped that balance, triggering a total collapse. The intersection of these stories shares a familiar motif: radiant rise, glorious peak, and ending in darkness. Is this merely a classic mythological pattern, or a blurred memory preserved over generations, a historical piece erased by time and modern understanding? Our exploration of Atlantis ends for now with many theories and unveiled layers of meaning. But at this ending point, another door opens, inviting us to reflect more deeply, to revisit what we thought we knew, and to reframe the timeline we're walking. If Atlantis really existed, then why can't the modern world find definitive evidence? Or perhaps history has chosen silence before truths beyond human comprehension.